Chapter 6. Understanding Persuasion. Persuasion is that ability that people have to transmit ideas that they are disseminated by those who act as recipients of them. This translates more effectively as the ability that human beings have through a relationship to convince others. A persuasion is a tool that can be used in fields such as marketing, advertising, and commerce, basically sectors of the economy in which the public is sensitive to various interactions with environmental media and where the decision is the objective of who persuade. Let us elaborate a scene in which a seller wants his products to be acquired by the buyers. These, besides being useful, must be attractive and, in one way or another, more desirable than that of the competition. This is achieved with persuasion, and which attracts customers by offering the best attributes of the product or service in an effective way, providing comfort to the buyer by relating the most promotional aspects to the most personal. Persuasion, in turn, generates competition and demand in the market, generating dynamism of intentions and offers that fosters the development of sustainable economies. Another use of persuasion that we see in a society constantly is in the application of the law. In a trial, the lawyer, in addition to using the law as the main tool, use the elements in their favor and persuade the jury and the judge that they are valid to win the case. We are always waiting for others who live in our environment to reproduce or share our ideas, even unintentionally. People seek to persuade others so that their ends are fulfilled. A wife who asks her husband to optimize expenses is trying to convince him that it is the best for both. Either way, each person's ideas will be interpreted as an intention for the others to apply and build their own ideas based on the initial idea. Persuasion can be so extreme that they can change the way a person thinks. It all depends on what the person who persuades another looks for. Persuasion is not based on slogans. We must bear in mind that the persuasion process is not direct. That is, because one person tells another that they should exercise more or use X product with a convincing technique, that does not mean that the latter will obey him. Some elements that hinder a real change from occurring are the fact of presenting weak arguments that the recipient can counteract, further reinforcing his initial point of view. In addition, believing that they want to manipulate us through deception or simplistic proclamations makes the process of being persuaded more difficult, causing resistance and even an action contrary to what was intended when our personal freedom was attacked. This phenomenon is called reactance. Key elements of persuasion. To better understand the process by which one person or medium can influence another by changing their mind, it is necessary to take into account the key elements of the process. These being the issuing source, the receiver, the message itself, and the technique that it is used to transmit it. 1. Issuer. Regarding who transmits the information, the source that tries to persuade, there are two characteristics that are taken into consideration when it comes to being or not being persuaded: its attractiveness and credibility. It has been shown in multiple experiments that we generally consider those individuals we perceive to be more reliable, partly because of the halo effect, in which we assume that someone who has a good quality will surely have others. This is the reason why men and women of great physical attractiveness or well-valued celebrities frequently appear in advertising in order to sell us a product. However, the most influential feature of the source when it comes to persuading us is credibility, which is given to the level of competence of the source in the subject matter and the perceived sincerity. 2. Receiver. With regard to the recipient of the message, the main characteristic that affect the time of being influenced are the level of intelligence, self-esteem, and the level of involvement with the subject. It must be taken into consideration that the effect of the intelligence level should not be taken as a direct measure. It is not that who is more influential is less intelligent, but someone with higher intelligence will have more resources to question the arguments put forward in persuasion. By having a higher capacity to learn and use in real time, the information memorized, the way of a dialogue of the most intelligent people, is more fluid and consistent, something that is reflected in the results they obtain when it comes to convincing. With regard to self-esteem, we generally find that the lower self-esteem, the less likely we will consider our own arguments as valid, more easily accepting those of others. 3. Message. Another of the main elements when it comes to persuading someone is the message itself. Several studies indicate that the fact of using a more rational or more emotional message will depend on the type of response you want to favor. It also affects the message incorporating elements that cause fear or a sense of threat. According to Rogers' protection motivation theory, we will tend to seek and consider more certain words that allow us to minimize or avoid damage. The fact that persuasion occurs more often with a closed or open message has also been investigated, indicating that it is generally better to leave a conclusion open to interpretation, although guided in the direction of which one wishes to persuade. This may be because in this way the listeners are more satisfied when they reach those conclusions, something they experience as if it had been a discovery made by themselves without someone trying to impose an idea from outside. 3 keys to persuading how to persuade others. Our brains are programmed to save time and energy in decision making, which is accomplished by a mechanism known as heuristic. These heuristic hundreds are the basis on which our brains function and help us live without statistically calculating, or rationally, each of calculates the actions we perform. Therefore, heuristics impersonate emotional, subjective, and rational. Heuristics, our brain looks for shortcuts. Heuristics are parents of prejudice, our musical taste, our brand reputation, and we commit our secrets. Aware of this, and looking at the influence they have given to humans' communication, marketing science, analyzed them and started using them, consume products and messages that persuade people to message. This is the principle of persuasion. Understanding how the brain works are the easiest way to influence it. Is persuasion the same as operation? They are different. Persuasion clarifies your intention in the search for influence on the behavior of others. Operation is intent to influence, but without showing your intent. Persuasion is okay. The operation is incorrect. Persuasive or persuasive art principles. We persuade you when you want to watch a movie, when you want to see someone else, when you announce a project when you are trying to be attractive to others. It is important to learn social skills to do it honestly and effectively. What are those principles of persuasion based on our brain function? I use 3 key brain mechanisms to persuade. 1. Rareness. The opportunity seems more valuable to us when its availability is limited. If we see that the quantity of something is small, we like it more. That child wants a toy, but can't she have it? Well, as we grow up, the attitude doesn't change much. Therefore, there are advertising gimmicks such as limited edition and short-term special offer. 2. Authority. Authority is the best tool to persuade. Humans follow it because it is beneficial. If I follow, think about what the right option is and save me. I have to follow the instructions of the knowing person. Must learn persuasion techniques in psychology. In our modern world, time is increasingly rare, and as Alfred Whitehead says, civilization advances by expanding the number of operations we can do without thinking about them, which means that, despite increasing access to information, when we have to decide, we can simplify the decision process by taking into account what has been helpful in the past and choosing to buy a product, for example, in a matter of seconds without really thinking. 1. Reciprocity. Reciprocity has been thoroughly studied by anthropology researchers like Marcel Mauss, and it means, in short, that when we receive something, we must give something back. It is easier to understand what reciprocity is by some examples. If you go to the doctor and he gives you a free sample of medicine that you will always need to use, this free, from a pharmaceutical industry point of view, is not free. After all, as we say in economics, there is no free lunch. The industry that made the drug gives the free sample because it knows the reciprocity. The patient, upon receiving the free medicine, will be much more likely to buy the medicine later, rather than buying a generic or medicine from the competitor. A well-known online movie and series site offers a free month to try the service, as it also knows reciprocity. In the case of both the drug and the movie site, we are not talking about the intrinsic quality to buy. That is, the quality may remain the same, but when using reciprocity, offering something free, the consumer will fall into the persuasion that they have to give back something. Of course, you still have the choice not to subscribe to the site or buy generic medicine. However, research shows that by using reciprocity, sales increase dramatically. 2. Consistency. The next principle is consistency, which means that people like to stay consistent in the things they say or do. Consistency starts from the moment you make a commitment or a decision or position. The researchers found, not surprisingly, in a well-known study that few people would agree to have a "Drive Cautiously" sign to support a road safety campaign in their neighborhood. However, in a similar neighborhood, almost 4 times more homeowners have agreed to have this campaign "Drive Carefully" poster on a sign. Why? Just because 10 days ago the residents of this neighborhood agreed to place a map on the front window of their homes that shows they support the campaign of driving cautiously. And this little map was the initial commitment made by its inhabitants, who take us to its 400% increases on a larger scale, but always in a consistent way. So, when one seeks to influence when using the principle of coherence, the influence sensor seeks voluntarism, energy, and public commitment. The most powerful being to have a written commitment. For example, a recent study tells us how to reduce appointment cancellations by 18%, only by asking the patient to fill in their form for the date and time of the appointment instead of the secretary or a member of staff who does it for him. 3. The affection. The third principle, that of affection, is based on the fact that people prefer to say yes to the people they love. But what makes one person love another? Persuasion experiments show us that there are 3 essential factors. We like people who look like us. We want people who give us compliments. We want people who have the same goals as us and who cooperate. Nowadays, most of the interactions we have are online, and influence can also apply to online sales. For example, on Amazon, you have product suggestions, special offers, free shipping, which sends you by email products that interest you. Another example is in everyday life, with negotiations between 2 groups of MBA students from 2 different business schools. One of the groups is told that time is money and that you have to stay focused on the business. In this same group, 55% of them have reached agreement. In a second group, they were told that before starting any negotiations, it was necessary above all to exchange information, to find similarities with each other, and it is only from then on that the negotiations could begin. In this socialized group, nearly 90% have reached an agreement, which represents 80% more success. So, to honor this principle of affection, to love, one must first look for similarities with the other and give a real compliment. 3. Social approval. Social approval is simple to watch for TV ads and websites as well. When a car industry makes a point of showing in every letter that it is the best-selling car, the best-selling tablet, or that everyone is using, they are using this form of persuasion. In order not to overthink, we end up evaluating that a product or service is good when there is social approval. A professional is the best when everyone is seeking his assistance, and he has a busy schedule. A website is one of the best when hundreds of thousands of people like and approve. 4. Affinity. The person of affinity is when the salesperson, or who wants to persuade us, puts himself in a position of affinity with our position. It is similar to empathy, but has a special identifying factor. For example, say a person is overweight and is going to buy a pair of jeans, and the saleswoman who is going to provide care is also overweight. By trying some pieces, the saleswoman shows a brand that she herself approves, that she used herself, and that looked great on her body. By affinity, the tendency to sell this brand is much higher. 5. Authority. Authority is easy to see, and we usually do not realize that it could be a weapon of persuasion against us. When in an advertisement, a company that sells toothpaste puts a dentist in a particular field to say that he recommends that brand, not the others, even if only implied, marketing is using the weapon of authority. We are also trained to trust authority. If the expert says it is true, we don't need to think and buy or agree. 6. shortage. And finally, the last technique we will study in our free persuasion course is scarcity. Scarcity means that there is little quantity of the product or service, as it is about to end. We have to buy fast. Better for those who are selling if the purchase has to be done immediately. For those who have come to catch the time of inflation and price freeze here in Brazil, remember the queues in supermarkets and empty shelves. In the end, it might not be a real scarcity, but the scarcity coupled with the fact that the price could rise so much the following week and then make the product end that we had to buy it. The idea behind scarcity is simple, and we see this 1,000 times in our daily lives. Buy it now, it's over. They are the last units. Types of persuasion. Persuasion is divided and classified into many parts in several areas. But the initial classification is related to reason or emotion. The rationale. Persuasive appeals are augmentation, logic, the scientific method, and proof. Emotional appeals are related to rhetoric, faith, tradition, propaganda, publicity, values, and beliefs. Let's talk about them here. The first type of persuasion is argumentation. It arises in Greece in 427 BC. Arguing is the art of convincing or persuading someone in some idea. It aims to lead the individual or group to accept a particular idea, thesis, defended by the argumentation for reasons of familiarity or even for the acceptance of the particular opinion. The argumentative text is clear and concise in its ideas and deals with varied themes, situations, or subjects. It consists of a generally short first paragraph of the idea and is quite clear. In its development, it expresses the opinion of the author. This is done with convincing and real arguments and with persuasive and reliable examples. Argumentation is also characterized by expressing counter-arguments so as not to allow the reader during reading to make them. In closing the argument, she responds to the debated central theme, demonstrating the author's central idea and his opinion on the subject matter. It must be borne in mind that the argumentative text was very much produced by the philosophers and expressed a clear view of their worldview. The argumentative discourse of philosophy moves between the thesis defended and its contestation. This discourse is widely used today in law thesis or in the demonstration of product features and benefits, especially in business or in the sale of real estate, insurance, or private pension. It is not easy to construct an argumentative discourse because we must be cautious with the values and beliefs we have so that it does not interfere with the discourse. Another widely used persuasive speech is logic. It is a word derived from the Greek logos. Its meaning is thought, idea, rapport, reason, logical principle. The main defender of logic was Aristotle, and he demonstrated it in his work, Organon. She was widely employed in the sciences such as mathematics or philosophy, for example. Since thought is a manifestation of knowledge, and that this is a human condition in the pursuit of truth, this logical thinking is attained only by certain conditions, which are based on the discourse of rightness, of righteousness. So the logic is only an instrument of the way of thinking, so logic is learned and not an end in itself. It only makes sense as a means of demonstrating thought, in order to arrive at knowledge considered correct. Its realization is through reasoning based on evidence presented and supporting it to conclude some thesis. The logical system is a set of common sense rules or codes that represent valid reasoning. Formally constituted systems of formal logic, such as mathematicians, for example, have helped in the practical applications of scientific discourse in the exact and biological sciences. It describes reasoning, that is, a system that defines a model to avoid the error. It is a deductive method and induces the receptor in the desired path. Logic basically establishes the structure of the elaboration of a model and its respective codes, which necessarily implies learning them, thus the difficulty of those who do not master it in considering them logical. Worse, logic even pretends to define that this is the only way that all people reason, but we know that not all people reason by the deductive method. There is also the intuitive method, the associative, etc. And psychology has several studies of cognitive processes, that is, how people learn. Effective techniques to persuade others in life and in business. Persuasion is not that others do what I want, but that they want to do what I want them to do. This phrase from politician Winston Churchill perfectly describes the ability to influence other people's decisions, a skill linked to leadership, but that many confuse with manipulation. Few people believe that persuasion should be part of their work, and they attribute it to politicians or sellers of dubious ethics. Could not be further from the truth. If it is possible, responsible, and seeks common benefit, it is part of communication and leadership, and any professional should develop it. And anyone can be persuasive. Not all influential people are instinctive, although there are born leaders. The secrets of persuasive communication are learned and can be applied quickly and successfully in a professional environment, regardless of the position we have. Influence and authority. The ancient Romans claimed that a good leader had potestas, influence power, and a bad one had auctoritas, authority. Authority can be imposed, but the influence is always granted by others. In a work environment, the ability to persuade will depend on the perception of the environment and the credibility they give you, not on the position you occupy in the company. Persuading is a complex skill that will allow you to achieve your long-term goals. Before throwing yourself to convince others, practice behaviors that strengthen your leadership. Define your goals. Think about precisely what you want to achieve and set yourself priority goals. Towards them, you must direct your influence without wasting efforts to take the cat to the water when it is not worth it. Think positive. No one manages to persuade another using negative phrases or concepts. Do not blame others. Criticize their work or show contempt. Banish words like impossible or failure from your vocabulary. Take command. If you want to be influential, always keep your composure. You must remain serene in the face of challenges and difficulties and demonstrate your safety. That way, others will trust you when they have to make decisions. Do not go through the branches. Always use simple, clear, and precise arguments. Get used to not wandering or abusing abstract concepts. If others believe that you don't hide anything and have bright ideas, they will surrender to your influence. Listen actively. To influence someone, it is necessary to see the world with their eyes, and this is only achieved by listening. Only when you know what your boss, your client, or your team wants and needs will you be in the ideal position to exert your influence. Listen actively. To influence someone, it is necessary to see the world with their eyes, and this is only achieved by listening. Only when you know what your boss, your client, or your team wants and needs will you be in the ideal position to exert your influence. Listening must be active. If you don't get enough information, ask. You have to ask open-ended questions that cannot be answered with a yes or no. This will allow you, at the same time, to obtain information and direct the communication to the point that interests you. Choose the right bait. If you want to fish a shark, you will use a meat bait. If you're going to move a donkey, you will put a carrot in front. Each person acts, moved by different values, beliefs, and desires. Identify them and use them in the persuasion process. Managing feelings. Most people make decisions moved by their emotions and then justify them rationally. For this reason, the heart of the influence is that it really reaches the heart. Enthusiasm, empathy, sincerity, and honesty are more convincing than the best of rational arguments. If you want to persuade someone, appeal to their emotions using your own feelings. Select the information. You must be honest, but that doesn't mean you say everything you know. A good leader must assess what information he provides to others, how to handle and interpret it. Sometimes you will have to omit data and sometimes offer irrelevant information that distracts the other person or influences you unconsciously. How to overcome the excuses of your interlocutor. When we try to persuade another person, we are forcing them to make a decision. This creates a defense mechanism in your mind, a resistance that can be aggravated if we don't use influence well. Act carefully when the first objections and excuses appear. Avoid confrontation. In this situation, it is important not to start a confrontation. If you take the opposite of your interlocutor, you will only be able to strengthen his position and force him to defend his point of view. Ignore the resistance. Most objections evaporate into the air alone because they are excuses or simple comments to save time or determine a negotiating position. Therefore, it is best to ignore them and move on with your arguments. Give him the reasons. When the other person repeats his objection several times, it means that he is real and less willing to be persuaded. In these cases, openly admit what he says, minimizing everything possible and exposing the advantages of your point of view. For example, if he tells you that it is an expensive project, you can answer that it is costly because it solves all the problems we now have and will allow us to save in the future. Question. Sometimes the other person will give you false excuses to get rid of you, but has an unknown reason not to give in to your influence. In these cases, the information you have is insufficient, and you must find out the real cause of its resistance. But do not ask openly. It is much better to use indirect methods. You say you cannot take on this task because you are overworked. Could you do it next week? Handle the numbers. Many times a person resists our influence because the decision we are forcing him to have has a cost, economic or otherwise, for him. If the problem is related to the figures, there are many ways to present them. There is more to see the difference between these two phrases. There is a 95% chance that the operation will go well, and there is a 5% chance that he will die in operation. The most effective trick for manipulating numbers is to reduce the scale of the problem. For example, you want to sell a house and the buyer claims that 250,000 euros are too many for him. Ask how much he intended to spend. If you answer that 200,000, you must say, then the problem is 50,000 euros. The return to the tortilla. It's about using the other's objections for your benefit. If your interlocutor alleges that your proposal is too bold, answer that he has always been a pioneer. If his excuse is that others will not accept it, he says it is admirable that he has never been guided by the opinions of others. The most advisable thing is to appeal to his vanity, flattering his courage or vision of the future, trying to make him feel unique and powerful. Infallible tricks. Close a sale, get a raise, promote your ideas. There are infallible tricks to influence others, although you have to use them with care and delicacy. Take it for granted. Behave as if others were to act according to your wishes. Many vendors begin filling out the order form before their customer has decided. Although it is a bit aggressive, it works because most of us have a hard time letting others down or openly opposing them. The alternative. It consists of placing the other person in a position to choose between two solutions, both favorable to your interests. When do we carry out the project? Next month or within 2 months? The other person will believe that the choice has been yours and will not feel so pressured. The balance. If you know that your idea has visible disadvantages, admit the negative aspects, but take them off and summarize them in one. Then exaggerate the positive aspects and break down each argument into several. You will influence others while conveying honesty and objectivity. Ace the sleeve. If the other opposes resistance, offer him an unexpected extra that makes him feel that he has taken something from you. If we shorten the delivery deadlines, there would be a budget to start your project. In reality, the project has already been approved. The challenge. Subtly doubt your ability to do what you want me to do. Maybe this task is too complicated for you. Do it only with challenging, competitive, and proud people. Anchorage. It causes an unconscious response in the other person using a stimulus. If you want to convince your boss of something, create a favorable mood in him. Ask him about his favorite sport. The anchor that state with a precise gesture. Touch his arm, offer him a coffee. Then, when you propose your idea, repeat that gesture. He will feel unconscious and will be favorable to your suggestions. Covert order. The phrase seems like a suggestion, but hides an order and gives better results. If you say, I will present my report if you want, you can take notes. Everyone will take notes. Hypnotic structures. It is a series of phrases that exert an almost hypnotic effect on the listener. The first is an objective truth. We are all concerned about the drop in sales. The following may be true. Sales have fallen by 10%, and is supported by another that is no longer an objective truth, but it serves your interest. A new design would stimulate consumption. In the last sentence, you will express your suggestion. To improve the design, you have to invest 100 million. By inertia, your interlocutor will grant the same credibility to all phrases